Good morning. The first moments after you wake up are not just a transition from sleep to wakefulness. They are, in fact, a critical window, neurologically, psychologically, and behaviorally. During this time, your brain is highly plastic, meaning it's more receptive to rewiring. What you do in those first 5 to 10 minutes can dictate your mindset, performance, and emotional state for the entire day. What I'm about to share with you isn't just motivational fluff. It's based on how the brain encodes identity and belief through repetition and emotion. These 9 affirmations are tools that, when used daily, begin to shift your internal narrative, redirect your focus, and train your nervous system for resilience, clarity, and growth. Good morning. The first moments after you wake up are not just a transition from sleep to wakefulness. They are, in fact, a critical window, neurologically, psychologically, and behaviorally. During this time, your brain is highly plastic, meaning it's more receptive to rewiring. What you do in those first 5 to 10 minutes can dictate your mindset, performance, and emotional state for the entire day. What I'm about to share with you isn't just motivational fluff. It's based on how the brain encodes identity and belief through repetition and emotion. These 9 affirmations are tools that, when used daily, begin to shift your internal narrative, redirect your focus, and train your nervous system for resilience, clarity, and growth. Affirmations are more than just positive statements. They are neural cues that can shape identity by leveraging the brain's ability to learn through repetition and emotion. The way we talk to ourselves creates internal scripts, and these scripts, when repeated consistently, begin to influence not just our mood, but our sense of self. This process is rooted in the principles of neuroplasticity, the idea that the brain reorganizes itself in response to repeated experience. When you repeatedly affirm a belief, especially with emotional engagement, you're reinforcing specific neural pathways that support that belief. Over time, these pathways become more efficient, making those thoughts feel more automatic, more natural, and eventually more true. The brain does not distinguish well between imagined experiences and real ones when emotion is involved. This is particularly important in the context of self-affirmation. If you say something like, "I am capable," or "I am focused," while simultaneously engaging in a physiological state of calm and alertness, such as through deep breathing or good posture, your brain begins to pair that statement with a feeling of safety and clarity. These pairings are critical. When thoughts are emotionally charged, they are more likely to be encoded by the hippocampus and integrated into long-term memory systems. In simple terms, thoughts with emotion stick, and repeated thoughts become identity. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex plays a central role in this process. It evaluates the personal relevance of information, especially information related to self. When you repeat affirmations, particularly those that speak to values or goals that feel meaningful, this area of the brain becomes more active. Over time, affirmations that align with core personal values begin to shift self-perception. You are no longer just saying something. You begin to believe it because your brain is processing it as part of your narrative, part of who you are. Repetition is the mechanical part of this process. Each time you repeat a thought, especially with intention and consistency, you are strengthening a synaptic connection. The old adage, neurons that fire together, wire together, is highly relevant here. It means that the more often 2 events occur together, in this case, a verbal affirmation and a physiological or emotional state, the stronger the connection between them becomes. Eventually, saying, "I am resilient," doesn't just sound like a phrase. It becomes a trigger for the internal resources and behaviors associated with resilience. Emotion gives the process depth. When affirmations are flat or robotic, the effect is minimal. But when they are spoken with conviction or even mild emotional engagement, the brain treats them as important. This is why pairing affirmations with gratitude, visualization, or bodily movement can increase their effectiveness. These added dimensions activate multiple brain systems simultaneously, including those responsible for emotion, movement, and memory, increasing the likelihood of deep and lasting change. Physical posture plays a significant role in shaping our mental and emotional state. a phenomenon well permitted by research in neuroscience and behavioral psychology. The way we hold our bodies sends signals to the brain about our current status, whether we are safe, threatened, confident, or uncertain. These signals are processed largely through the autonomic nervous system and the brainstem, which influence alertness, emotion regulation, and cognitive control. Simply put, how we position our body influences how we feel and think, even before a single conscious thought is formed. Posture is not just structural, it's biofeedback. When you stand tall with your chest open and shoulders relaxed, you send a message to the brain that you are in control, safe, and ready. This upright stance activates the sympathetic branch of the nervous system in a balanced way, promoting alertness without triggering stress. Simultaneously, it helps downregulate the parasympathetic pathways associated with withdrawal or collapse, both of which are often present in anxiety and depression. Research has shown that even subtle changes in posture can lead to measurable differences in hormone levels, such as decreased cortisol and increased testosterone, both of which influence confidence and focus. In the context of affirmations and mindset training, posture serves as an amplifier. When you speak a phrase like, "I am confident," while standing upright, breathing deeply, and facing forward, your entire nervous system begins to associate those physical sensations with the verbal expression. This coupling of physical and verbal input creates a multisensory experience that strengthens the neural encoding of that affirmation. It's not just the words that matter, it's the embodied state in which you say them. The brain remembers the full context of the experience: tone, emotion, and physical sensation. The act of directing your gaze slightly upward is another physical cue that shifts mental state. Eye position affects brain activity because of how the visual system is wired into the brain. Looking upward tends to increase activation in the prefrontal cortex associated with future planning and abstract thinking. It also naturally elevates alertness and engagement. By contrast, looking downward tends to induce introspection, passivity, or even sadness, which is why gaze position is often used as a diagnostic tool in clinical settings. When affirmations are delivered while looking upward and projecting the voice with intent, the physiological and psychological effects are stronger and more lasting. Postural feedback also impacts breathing patterns. Slouched or collapsed postures tend to restrict diaphragmatic breathing, leading to shallow breaths that reinforce feelings of tension or unease. Upright posture facilitates fuller, more regulated breathing, which calms the vagus nerve and promotes a state of relaxed alertness. This state is ideal for learning, memory formation, and behavior change. When you adopt a strong physical stance while engaging in self-talk or visualization, you're creating a body-brain alignment that primes you for action, confidence, and clarity. The physical body, therefore, is not just a vessel for the brain, but an active participant in shaping mental and emotional states through posture, gaze, breath, and movement. The relationship between action and identity is foundational in both neuroscience and behavioral science. While thoughts and intentions initiate many internal processes, it is ultimately our actions that shape and reinforce our sense of self. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine that constantly observes behavior, both conscious and unconscious, and uses that data to update its internal model of who we are. This means that every action taken, especially those done repeatedly, feeds into the construction of identity. Over time, the brain starts to associate consistent behaviors with personal traits, such as discipline, resilience, or procrastination, depending on what is being practiced. Behavior creates feedback loops within the nervous system. When you act in alignment with a certain identity, whether it's being productive, calm, or focused, you generate a cascade of neurochemical responses that reinforce that identity. For example, completing a task releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation. This not only feels good, but also teaches the brain that the behavior was beneficial and should be repeated. With repetition, the link between the action and the resulting neurochemical reward becomes stronger, eventually forming a habit and, on a deeper level, a piece of your self-concept. Intentions alone, even if positive or well-formed, do not create the same level of reinforcement in the brain. They may provide temporary clarity or emotional uplift, but without behavior to support them, they remain abstract. The brain doesn't code thoughts with the same permanence as actions. This is why saying, "I want to be confident," does not impact the nervous system as deeply as standing tall, speaking clearly, and acting with decisiveness. Those physical behaviors create sensory input that the brain uses to adjust its internal state. The more often these behaviors occur, the more the brain integrates them into its understanding of who you are. This mechanism is also observed in how the brain encodes memory. Episodic memories, those that are tied to specific actions, locations, and physical states, are stored more vividly than purely intellectual or verbal memories. When you take action, you are creating a multi-sensory experience that is much more likely to be remembered and therefore internalized. The brain registers not just what you did, but how it felt, what you saw, and even your physiological state at the time. This rich data informs future decision-making and influences how you respond to similar situations going forward. Action also engages multiple brain regions simultaneously, including the motor cortex, prefrontal cortex, and basal ganglia. This coordination strengthens neural circuits related to willpower, goal-directed behavior, and habit formation. It means that the simple act of doing something, even small, has a compound effect over time. Every repeated action becomes a vote for the type of person you are becoming. This is not merely philosophical, it's measurable in terms of brain connectivity, synaptic strength, and hormonal feedback. By consistently choosing behaviors that align with your desired identity, you're literally wiring your brain to support that version of yourself. Discomfort is an essential component of growth, and the way we interpret discomfort significantly impacts whether we thrive through it or retreat from it. From a neurobiological standpoint, the human brain is designed not to avoid stress entirely, but to adapt through it. This concept, often referred to as stress inoculation, is based on the idea that controlled, intentional exposure to challenges enhances mental and physiological resilience. The body learns through repetition that difficulty does not equate to danger, and the nervous system gradually becomes more efficient at regulating itself under pressure. When you encounter discomfort, whether physical, emotional, or cognitive, your body initiates a stress response. This includes increased heart rate, elevated cortisol levels, and a sharpening of attention. In short bursts, this response is not harmful. It is, in fact, beneficial. The stress response activates systems responsible for learning, memory, and behavioral adaptation. The key factor lies in perception. When discomfort is framed as a threat, the brain's amygdala takes over, leading to avoidance behavior and heightened anxiety. However, when discomfort is reframed as an opportunity for growth, the prefrontal cortex remains engaged, allowing for adaptive decision-making and emotional regulation. Framing discomfort as a growth signal changes the internal narrative from "something is wrong" to "this is where change happens." This cognitive reframing activates different neural pathways. Instead of engaging default mode networks associated with rumination and self-doubt, the brain shifts toward task-positive networks that prioritize focus, action, and learning. Over time, this shift becomes habitual, and the individual becomes less reactive and more proactive in the face of difficulty. The process of adaptation through discomfort is well illustrated in physical training. Muscles grow stronger, not during rest, but in response to micro tears caused by exertion. Similarly, the brain becomes more efficient through the repeated challenge of its limits, whether in learning, emotional regulation, or endurance. Each time a person chooses to stay present in a difficult moment, they activate and reinforce circuits responsible for stress tolerance and emotional control. These experiences increase the threshold at which stress becomes overwhelming, effectively raising the ceiling for performance and resilience. Breathing, posture, and focus during discomfort also influence how the nervous system integrates the experience. Slow, deliberate breathing calms the vagus nerve, signaling to the body that it is safe even during challenge. This pairing of stress with calm breathing creates a new association that difficulty does not have to mean panic. Similarly, maintaining an upright posture during discomfort sends a feedback signal to the brain indicating readiness and strength, not collapse. These physical behaviors reinforce the narrative that discomfort is not to be feared, but to be utilized. On a molecular level, intermittent exposure to manageable stress improves the efficiency of neurotransmitter systems like dopamine and norepinephrine, which govern motivation, alertness, and mood regulation. This means that not only does the person feel more capable in the face of future challenges, but the brain also becomes better at generating the internal chemistry needed to stay focused and energized during those moments. The first thoughts and emotions we experience each day form the baseline for how our nervous system operates throughout the waking hours. Gratitude, when practiced intentionally in the morning, has the capacity to recalibrate both physiological and psychological processes. From a neuroscience perspective, gratitude is not merely a moral or spiritual practice. It is a cognitive emotional exercise that activates specific brain regions and alters neurotransmitter activity in measurable ways. The act of consciously recognizing something positive, especially during the early hours of the day, helps to modulate the brain's default mode network, which otherwise tends to drift towards self-referential thought and worry. Gratitude activates the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area involved in valuation and emotional regulation. This activation leads to a greater sense of well-being, not because circumstances change, but because perception does. The brain becomes more attuned to what is working, what is stable, and what is possible. This attentional shift has cascading effects on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPAS axis, which governs the body's stress response. Regular engagement in gratitude reduces baseline levels of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, creating a neurochemical environment more conducive to calm focus and emotional stability. Importantly, gratitude must be specific and embodied to have these effects. Vague or generic expressions of gratitude do not generate the same neural activity as reflecting on a concrete experience or person. When the brain recalls a vivid, meaningful instance of gratitude, it engages memory networks and links them with emotional processing areas like the amygdala and insula. This linkage strengthens the emotional weight of the gratitude experience and promotes deeper integration into the brain's interpretive framework. In other words, the brain begins to update its internal model of the world as being safer, more cooperative, and less threatening. Morning is the optimal time for this practice because the brain is transitioning from a highly suggestible sleep state into full conscious awareness. The neurochemical profile of the brain at this time, elevated cortisol, low serotonin, shifting acetylcholine levels, makes it highly responsive to environmental cues and internal thought patterns. Introducing gratitude during this window leverages the brain's readiness to encode new patterns. Over time, this practice begins to rewire the circuits responsible for attention, emotion, and perception, increasing the likelihood that the brain will seek and recognize positive information throughout the day. Gratitude also enhances social cognition by activating brain networks associated with empathy and connection. This is particularly relevant when the gratitude is directed toward another person or a shared experience. The resulting neural activity strengthens the sense of social safety and belonging, both of which are fundamental human needs. From a behavioral standpoint, this increases pro-social behavior, cooperation, and trust, which in turn improve mental health and performance outcomes across various domains. Finally, the physiological effects of gratitude extend to heart rate variability, HRV, a measure of autonomic nervous system balance. Higher HRV is associated with better emotional regulation, stress resilience, and cardiovascular health. Practicing gratitude first thing in the morning sets this system into a more coherent, adaptable state, allowing for better reactions to stress and more consistent access to higher order thinking skills throughout the day.